In section 27, we're going to get down to brass tacks and learn how to classify goods using the HTSUS. We've talked about 19 CFR. We've certainly talked about the HTS, looked at some invoices. Now it's time to classify. Needless to say, based on what we've already seen, the HTSUS provides guidance on how to classify merchandise. Second bullet, whereas essential character and intended use are very important principles, the specific guidelines for classification provided by the HTSUS are found in the General Rules of Interpretation, the GRIs. We looked at them in a previous section. We're going to come back and look again. As we also stated, we'll say it again in our third bullet, classification guidance can also be found in both section and or chapter notes. We had said when we're classifying from the general to the specific, start with a section, look at the notes there, go to a chapter, look at the notes there, make sure we're in the right place. A quick trade tip, a classification best practice is to indeed go from a general description of an item to its most specific within the HTSUS. And depending on how much we know about a product, we can literally start with HTSUS search. If we have a good idea that an item is in a chapter, we can start with the chapter notes. Start with the most specific level of information that we have and go from there. As we said, and we'll state again, product classification is based on the principle of progressing from a general description of an item to the most specific and appropriate, hopefully starting off a good solid description on the vendor's commercial invoice. Within the HTSUS, that progression is based on the following: guidance from the General Rules of Interpretation, and they are General Rules of Interpretation, 6 of them. Section notes we talked about, chapter notes, chapter headings, that 4-digit number, chapter subheadings, an 8-digit legal classification, and the 10-digit statistical classification. When we do our classifications, we're going to go up to 10 digits and submit them on our entry summary as such. Let's bring up a supply chain perspective aptly entitled Classifying Goods Back in the Day. Long before the Mod Act, and definitely prior to the advent of the internet, importers and customs brokers had fewer resources to rely on when classifying goods for importation into the U.S. For example, entry writers in a customs brokerage operation had 2 hard copy publications on their desks, 19 CFR and the HTSUS, and you can be sure they took up a lot of space. Not only was this a cumbersome affair way back in the day, people working in the trade used to have to wait to receive hard copy updates via the mail. What was then a truly manual process, when entries would have to be printed out and taken physically to the local customs house for review physically by customs agents. Obviously, that's all changed. Second paragraph. Needless to say, a lot has changed in recent years, and both importers and brokers have a plethora of easy-to-access and easy-to-use resources at their fingertips. First off, updated versions of 19 CFR and the HTSUS are available online, so the need for hard copies taking up space on someone's desk is no longer a thing. Also, search tools that we've seen and given examples of, like Cross and HTS Search, make it so much easier for people to find what they're looking for. Last paragraph. Given all of the above, it's reasonable to say that the combination of the Mod Act, its focus on shared responsibility, and the development of internet-based tools that the U.S. government makes available to the trade community has truly achieved its goal of trade facilitation. The moral of this story is it's just a lot easier to engage in classification, valuation, preparation of entries, on and on. Okay, how to classify goods using the HTSUS, starting with the General Rules of Interpretation. We saw these previously. We talked about them a bit. We actually went through the entirety of number 1. Now we're going to look at 2A and 2B and parts of 3. You'll recall from number 1, briefly, that the table of contents, index, titles, and sections are provided for ease of reference only. For legal purposes, classification shall be determined according to the terms of the headings and any relative section or chapter notes, and provided such headings or notes do not otherwise require, according to the following provisions. We're focused on the headings and subheadings. Article descriptions. That's what we're looking at. 2A. Any reference in a heading to an article shall be taken to include a reference to that article incomplete or unfinished, provided that, as entered, meaning as the entry is prepared and physically entering into the commerce of the United States, the incomplete or unfinished article has the essential character of the complete or finished article. There's reference to essential character. This is really quite important. It shall also include a reference to that article, complete or finished, or failing to be classified as complete or finished by virtue of this rule, entered unassembled or disassembled. 2A is about essential character. What is it? That's important. 2B, any reference in a heading to a material or substance shall be taken to include a reference to mixtures or combinations of that material or substance with other materials or substances. Any reference to goods of a given material or substance shall be taken to include a reference to goods consisting wholly or partly of such material or substance. Continuing along, the classification of goods consisting of more than one material or substance shall be according to the principles of Rule 3. Let's have a look at that. When, by application of Rule 2B, or for any other reason, goods are prima facie, on their face, classifiable under two or more headings, classification shall be effected as follows. Let's reiterate that we're talking about goods on their face can be classified under two or more headings. What do we do? Well, in 3A, the heading which provides the most specific description shall be preferred to headings providing a more general description. There's that general to specific progression that we've been talking about. Second sentence is pretty important too. However, when two or more headings each refer to part only of the materials or substances contained in mixed or composite goods, or to part only of the items in a set put up for retail sale, which we'll see an example of, by the way, those headings are to be regarded as equally specific in relation to those goods, even if one of them gives a more complete or precise description of the goods. We're going to talk a bit about sets because in the retail world, lots of things come in sets. Our example actually focuses on kitchenware. 3B, mixtures, composite goods consisting of different materials or made up of different components, and goods put up in sets for retail sale, which cannot be classified by reference to 3A, shall be classified as if they consisted of the material or component which gives them their essential character, insofar as this criterion is applicable. In a set, whatever the article is that gives the set its most essential character, that's how it's to be classified. 3C, wrapping this up, this whole story about sets is pretty relevant. When goods cannot be classified to reference 3A or 3B, they shall be classified under the heading, which occurs last in numerical order among those which equally merit consideration. We put this in there for a couple of reasons. One, we wanted to hit it again. We saw it once. It's always a good idea, especially when talking about GRIs, to hit on that subject twice. We summarized number one, which we had talked about previously. We went into greater detail on classification in 2A and 2B. And then 3A, B, and C talk about sets and how they're to be handled. We have an example, as we said, of kitchenware coming up. For now, let's put kitchenware aside and look at a section excerpt. You will recall that we talked about going from the general to the specific, starting perhaps with the GRIs and understanding how classification works, getting a general idea of our product and where it might fall within the HTSUS, and start with the section. This example, which is section 11, deals with textiles and textile articles. That's because we also have an example that we should recognize. The denim jeans that we talked about way back in sourcing, that we use as an example for landed cost. We're going to come back to that and show how we classified those jeans. As far as this slide goes, if indeed we're going to classify jeans or a blouse, a skirt, what have you, Section 11, as the title shows, deals with textiles and textile articles. Moving down, we see the chapters that are included in Section 11 as part of this excerpt. We're going to import an article. We know it's made out of silk. Chapter 50 would be a good place. Wool, fine or coarse animal hair, 51. 52, cotton. Pretty general stuff there. Moving down, 57, carpets and other textile floor coverings. That's pretty specific as far as a chapter goes. We're interested in moving a little bit further down. In fact, our example will come from Chapter 62, articles of apparel and clothing accessories not knitted or crocheted. If we look above that, in Chapter 61, we will see articles of apparel and clothing accessories that are knitted or crocheted, and there is a big difference between the two from a classification and a customs duty perspective. When we're looking to classify jeans, we can start in Section 11, look down the chapters. We're dealing with cotton denim jeans. That would be Chapter 62. We'll talk more about that in just a bit. This slide should be familiar. It's the HTS Search Tool. We looked at it in two formats, Search and View. We could very easily type in women's cotton jeans here and be led to Chapter 62. We have an advantage because we have some prior knowledge about what section and chapter our product falls in. If we were complete novices and wanted to get a classification for women's blue denim jeans, we could type that in and it would eventually lead us to where we need to go. Here is Section 11, but with the PDF components of textile and textile articles. We can see this in HTS View using the tool in that way. We already know, kind of a little cheat sheet here, that we're looking for Chapter 62, articles of apparel and clothing accessories not knitted or crocheted. We can click on the PDF icon and guess where we're going to go? Right to Chapter 62. Needless to say, we can do that for all of the sections, all of the chapters, using the HTS View tool. This is a pretty lengthy section, so we're going to stop here, but come back and continue with how to classify goods using the HTSUS, and we can promise you that we'll be getting to that blue denim jeans classification. Come back quickly.